Hello, today we're doing some beginning deduction. As you can see, we're going to talk about a number of topics here. Under deductive validity, we're going to be talking about modus ponens, modus tollens, the hypothetical syllogism, and the disjunctive syllogism. And then we're going to be talking about two common deductive fallacies. The first is affirming the consequent, and the second is denying the antecedent. Modus ponens. So first, some terminology. This horseshoe here, that means if then. The blanks are if A, then B. So if Tracy is a surgeon, then she went to school. So that's a if they, then B type statement. It would be symbolized as A horseshoe B. And as you can see, I just color-coded everything here to make it a little bit easier. Plus, I labeled things A and B. These three dots, they just mean therefore. So, modus ponens is pretty straightforward. It's just a straight if-then conditional statement. Then you meet the condition, so the conclusion is true. If Stacy is a surgeon, then she went to school. She is a surgeon, therefore she went to school. If A then B, A is true, therefore B must be true. Modus tollens. For this one we need to add one new piece of symbology here. This tilde, it means not. Again, I labeled the A and the B, and I labeled not B separately here. So the symbology is if A then B, not B, therefore we know not A. And again, this is deductively valid. So here's just filling in the blanks. But what's important to remember, since these are deductively valid forms, anything we put into these blanks, it doesn't matter what it is that we put into these blanks, is going to be valid. You know, instead of surgeon, we can have a nonsense word here. We can have a word you don't recognize. It doesn't matter, since validity in deduction's all about form. So, if Tracy is a surgeon, then she went to school. Tracy did not go to school, therefore we know she's not a surgeon. Since if she is a surgeon, she must have went to school, and we know that she didn't go to school, know that she's not a surgeon. If A then B, not B, therefore not A. Okay, the hypothetical syllogism. No new terminology here. We're still using the same terminology. This time we're going to have C as well as A and B. So we're using an additional color here. It basically goes if A then B, if B then C, therefore if A then C. And again, it doesn't matter what you put in for A, B, and C. So if Rita gets a raise, then she will buy a house. If she buys a house, then she will go into debt. Therefore, if Rita gets a raise, she will go into debt. Deductively valid. If A is true, then B is true. If B is true, then C is true. Therefore, if A is true, then C is true. A disjunctive syllogism. Here we have one new piece of symbology. The little wedge there, that means or. We're back to just A and B here. The form is the form is A or B, not A, therefore B. John always has coffee or has wine with dinner. John didn't have coffee with dinner, therefore John had wine with dinner. Since we know either A or B is true, and we know A is not true, that only leaves B to be true. And again, it doesn't matter what is being put in these blanks, it's a valid form. Okay, so here's the idea of a thesis. A thesis in deductive logic, or actually in logic in general, is when you string together several of these into a larger conclusion. So in other words, you use premises to reach a conclusion, and then you use that conclusion as a premises in another argument to reach a further conclusion. So here we have a hypothetical syllogism. Here we have a disjunctive syllogism. And here we use both those as premises to reach another conclusion. And again, it's all about form here since we're doing deduction. So it doesn't matter what fits in here, but I fit in some text here that makes sense. Anybody that is taller than Bill is taller than Heidi, and anybody who is taller than Heidi is taller than Mark. That is the A horseshoe B. Therefore, anybody who is taller than Bill is taller than Mark. A horseshoe C. And that gives us this conclusion here. Now we're on to this part. Jackie is either taller than Bill or she is taller than Steve. But she is not taller than Steve. So A or D, but not D. Therefore, we know she's taller than Bill. Therefore, we know A. Now we take these two premises. Since we know that she is taller than Bill, and since anybody who is taller than Bill is taller than Mark, these two premises, we know that Jackie is taller than Mark. That's our conclusion. Now for two common deductive fallacies, affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent. Affirming the consequent. Here's an example. If Sally eats a bunch of candy at lunch, she will spoil her appetite for dinner. Sally had spoiled her appetite for dinner, therefore she ate a bunch of candy at lunch. Remember, this is a fallacy, so it's not correct. Here is the form. If Sally eats a bunch of candy for lunch again, she will spoil her appetite for dinner. She had spoiled her appetite for dinner, therefore she ate a bunch of candy at lunch. If A then B, B is true, therefore A is true. And remember, this is a fallacy. This isn't correct. In an if-then statement, if A then B, right, A then B, the antecedent is the A part, and the consequent is the B part. So affirming the consequent is saying that the B part is true. So the fallacy is to say, if A is true, then B is true, therefore we know that A is true. And if you look at this, you can figure it out. She might have spoiled her appetite in another way. Maybe she ate a bunch of, pizza for lunch. Maybe she ate a whole large pizza. Or maybe she ate a bunch of ice cream instead of a bunch of candy. Or maybe she did any number of other things. By the way, if you hear a cricket in the background, I'm sorry. We get a bunch of them in the house at this time of year. There doesn't seem to be anything I can do about it. Okay. So affirming the consequent is sometimes tricky because it looks like modus ponens. But remember, here is modus ponens. If A then B, then the antecedent is true, so the consequent is true. If A then B, A, therefore B. But this one, the fallacy says, if A then B, B, therefore A. it gets it exactly backwards. So if we wanted to make it not a fallacy, we would have to say something like, if Sally eats a bunch of candy at lunch, she will spoil her appetite for dinner. Sally did eat a bunch of candy at lunch, therefore she spoiled her appetite for dinner. Makes a lot more sense that way. Alright, denying the antecedent. If Akane shows up late, she will not get the promotion. She didn't show up late to the interview, so we can conclude that Akane got the promotion. Remember, again, this is a fallacy. So, denying the antecedent. Remember, this part is the antecedent of the if-then, and this part's the conclusion. So it's called denying the antecedent because it denies that the antecedent is true. So again, if Akane shows up late, she will not get the promotion. She didn't show up late to the interview, so we can conclude that she got the promotion. But all this says is that if she shows up late, she won't get the promotion. It doesn't guarantee that she will get the promotion if she shows up on time. It says, if A, then B. And B is not getting the promotion. So, the mere fact that she showed up on time, not A, not being late, doesn't mean that she will get the promotion, not B, not failing to get the promotion. And again, the reason it can be tricky is because it looks like another form. It looks a bit like modus tollens. So here is the non-fallacious one, modus tollens. If A, then B, not B. So this is denying the consequent, not denying the antecedent. So affirming the consequent is a fallacy. Denying the consequent isn't. So this denies the consequent and then denies the antecedent. That's modus tollens. That's okay. So to correct it, we would say, if Akane shows up late, she will not get the promotion. She did get the promotion, not B. Therefore, we can conclude that she didn't show up late to the interview. Because if she did show up late, we know that she would not get the promotion. Well, that wraps up this presentation. If you're in one of my courses that's using a textbook or is using a page that has exercises on it, make sure to try some of them until you get the hang of this and you can identify some of these forms. And I'll talk to you in the next presentation.